Oh, so we're up to 2003. I remember watching the 2003 playoffs, and it felt like something special was going on in Vancouver. This could finally be the year. This could finally be the year this team wins the Stanley Cup. Everything was in place. They had just experienced a 3-1 comeback against the St. Louis Blues, which was just fantastic. Um, it was really really great. Bertuzzi came into his own in that series as well, very similarly to how Kessler did in 2011 against Nashville. And meanwhile, the Minnesota Wild had come back from a 3-1 deficit against Colorado to win that one in 7. To which I, as a fan of the Canucks, said, well, thank God we don't have to play Colorado in round 2. Thanks for doing us a favor, Minnesota. Now, the Wild would end up winning the series, and then they would end up getting swept in the slowest series I've ever watched. See, at this point, Minnesota is playing trap hockey. And so for Vancouver, this is very different than the style of hockey they'd been playing against St. Louis. But really, they did quite well, and then it just completely and totally fell apart. And a lot of the blame gets thrown at Kluche, and Kluche's numbers after this series were not good. But there was some blame to go around. And so let's go ahead and jump into this. And again, I know there's other series. I keep seeing people saying, I want you to cover these series going forward. Yeah. And they're usually series that involve all of the big name star players. And some of them want me, for people who want me to cover the Stanley Cup Finals, I've already done that. I've done a whole series on Stanley Cup champions and on the finalists. And so it feels like I would just be repeating old material on the channel if I was talking about those series all over again. So I like in this series to talk about, in this playlist of series, I like to talk about ones that maybe people might forget, or in this case, one that Vancouver fans would like to forget. Game 1's in Vancouver. Of course, Vancouver was really good that year, 45-23, 13-11, whereas Minnesota was 42-29, 10-1. Goals for, Vancouver was second in the league with 264. Goals against, they were 10th with 208. The Minnesota Wild, 198 goals for, which was 24th in the NHL, 178 goals against, which was 4th. And really, in this series, we'll get to it. First period, power play goal by Zoltok from Kuba and Ronning at 17:08. Yes, Cliff Ronning against his former teammates here. Although by this time, I don't think there's anybody other than Linden that's in the lineup that would have played with him. And Linden would have left and come back before this. Shorthanded goal in the second by Jovanovski ties it up from Morrison and Jarkko Ruutu at 1:33. So it's 1-1 entering the third. And in the third period, Minnesota gives a hint as to what's coming up. It's Wes Walz. Where in the world did this series for Wes Walz come from? I ask as a Bruins fan. From Gaborik and Stevenson at 2:58, and then Walz scores again from Gaborik at 8:11. It's 3-1 Minnesota. But Marcus Naslund, unassisted, 11 minutes and 12 seconds. And then with 2 seconds left, Matt Cook brings all the fans to their feet from Trent Klatt and Marcus Naslund at 19:58. We go to overtime. The Canucks get a power play in overtime. It's Trent Klatt from Daniel Sedin and Sammy Salo at 3:42. And Vancouver survives a huge scare, down 3-1 in the third period at home in Game 1, and they win it. Manny Fernandez, 35 saves on 39 shots. Dan Cloutier saved 18 out of 21. Vancouver heavily outshoots Minnesota, but escapes with their life. And as a fan in Vancouver, you could say, hey, Cloutier allowed 3 on 21 shots, but we won the game. So Cloutier didn't have a great game, but they bailed him out. Game 2, no scoring in the first period. Second period is Gaborik from Dupuis at 4:40. I don't think I can describe to people who may be too young to know, but when Gaborik was at his best, he was scary good. And in this series, he was pretty scary good. Jovanovski scores from Linden and Chubarov at 17:18 to tie it up before the end of the first period. Third period, it happens again, a 3-1 lead. Zoltok from Brunette and Cuba at 1:02. And then Wall scores from Gaborik and Dupuis at 2:05. So 2 goals in about a minute. Oland would score at 18:28 to make it close, but Minnesota steals one in Vancouver. Rolison saves 29 out of 31 in the victory. Cloutier only faced 18 shots and saved 15 of them. It has to be frustrating as a player to know that keeping the shots against down isn't increasing your odds of victory. That has to be frustrating. So for the Canucks, there had to be some guys in that locker room that just, you love Cloutier, but you want to see more. So game 3 in Minnesota. And it's a power play goal for Morrison for Bertuzzi and Naslund. So that's the West Coast Express at 6:25. Then there's a power play goal to tie it by Minnesota. It's Cuba from Dowd and Burnett at 11:47. Second period. Power play goals abound again. Jovanovski on the power play from Morrison and Naslund at 4:34. Minnesota ties it with a power play goal of their own. Gaborik from Zoltok at 10:08. And then Vancouver restores the lead again on the power play. It's Daniel Sedin from Henrik Sedin and Matthias Oland at 12:33. Third period, no scoring. So this is a very low chance game. This is a very slow game. Kluche saves 16 out of 18. Rolison saves 10 out of 13. Yeah. So the shots, there were 31 shots in the entire game. Thankfully, there were 5 goals. It was not an exciting overall game. So game 4, and this was why people complained about games with Minnesota in general, because they were slow games. I mean, Lemaire's doing what he can to get as many wins as possible out of a team that's, well, Wes Walz was one of the best scorers in this series, so, nothing against Wes Walz, but still. Gaborik scores from Stevenson and Walz at 19:22 of game 4 to open the scoring. So it's 1-0 Minnesota after 1 and after 2. Third period, the goals start. Matt Cook from Latowski and Barron at 2:09. Gaborik then scores from Walz and Stevenson at 3:14, so about a minute after they restore their lead. But it's Ed Jovanovski with the tying goal at 17:54 from Sopel and Morrison. We're going overtime. In overtime, it is Sopel on the power play from Naslund and Morrison at 15:52. Vancouver escapes with a victory. Probably a bit lucky to do so. This is the second win they've had in overtime in this series. They're up 3-1. Kluche saves 25 out of 27. Was pretty good in that game. Fernandez saved 27 out of 30 as Minnesota continues to switch goalies up. Fernandez in games 1 and 4. Rolison in games 2 and 3. But Rolison's 1-1. Fernandez is 0-2 at this point. And so that's where my good old buddy Admiral Akbar shows up. Yes, the Akbar magnet's on the board because it felt like something happened with Vancouver going into Game 5. They're at home. They're at home. This is the frustrating thing about Vancouver's history. You have a chance to end a series at home. Nope. So, first period, it's Park scoring from Dowd. Dowd, who had been a Canuck before that, at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Morrison ties it from Naslund and Klatt at 18:13. 1-1 after 1. Second period. Everything Minnesota put on the net was going in. I don't know how else to put it, but everything they put on the net seemed to be going in that second period. It's a power play goal for Ronning from Gaborik and Zoltok at 1:08. So that makes it 2-1. And then Jason Marshall scores from Burnett and Walz at 7:44. Whoops. And then Burnett from Mitchell at 10:16. Also whoops. It's 4-1. And then Gaborik scores from Stevenson and Walz at 12:47. That's 3 goals there in about a 5-minute period of the game. And then at 16:07, it's Cliff Ronning unassisted. And Kluche's night's over. But it's 6-1 at that stage. Henrik Sedin scores from Barron and Klatt at 19:17, but that just makes it 6-2. Third period, with Alex Auld in the net, there's a shorthanded goal by Wes Walz at 16:20, because of course it's Wes Walz who had 3 points in this game. Rolison, 25 saves on 27 shots. Kluche saved 15 out of 21, and Alex Auld saved 4 out of 5. Yeah. But now they're going back to Minnesota. They've won 2 games in Minnesota. They have to just play a good game, and they're good. No scoring in the first, second period, about 5 minutes in. Power play goal by Burnett from Gaborik and Walz at 5:22. There's Walz on the board again. And then a power play goal by Sekarash from Gaborik and Zoltok at 15:31. So it's 2-0 Minnesota after 2. In third period, it's done. Darby Hendrickson scores from Laaksonen and Ronning at 6:57. Then there's a power play goal by Jovanovski from Morrison and Naslund at 8:57, followed by Laaksonen restoring the 3-goal lead about 30 seconds later from Ronning and Cuba at 9:25. And then it's a power play marker for Minnesota. It's Burnett from Ronning at 10:37. So in a period of about a minute and a half, it goes from being 3-1 to being 5-1. Kluche saves 18 out of 23. Rolison saves 30 out of 31. And if you're looking at these numbers and saying, why didn't they try Auld as a starter in one of the games? You wouldn't be the only one to ask that question. As this series was totally getting away from the Canucks, and Kluche had allowed 11 goals over 2 games. Keep in mind, this is after the infamous Nick Lidstrom center ice goal. I believe it was the year before against Detroit. So Kluche's playoff reputation was taking a hit. I believe these were the playoffs where he was playing hurt. Where after this was done, it came out while he was fighting an injury. Then he shouldn't have been in that. But again, hindsight's 20/20, right? Now, Game 7, it's at home, Vancouver. Game 7's at home in Vancouver. There's a tradition. Not a great tradition. First period, no scoring. Second period, Vancouver takes a lead. So they have it at home. They can win it at home. It's Oland from Sopel and Ruutu at 11:29. Then Bertuzzi scores from Henrik Sedin and Sopel at 12:30. 2 goals in about a minute. Whew, we survived that. No, Dupuis scores from Zoltok 3 minutes later at 15:30. Minnesota would not go away. There's no way to make Minnesota go away in this series. Third period, Walls scores from Laxonen and Schultz at 8:05. Hendrickson then scored from Park and Zuzan at 14:48. And then it's a power play goal by Minnesota. Dupuis from Zoltok and Park at 17:27, just to make sure they have that insurance and Vancouver can't come back. Vancouver loses 3 in a row. The combined score, 4, 9, 16 to 5 over those last 3 games. So when 2011 happens with Boston, I kind of felt like we'd been here before. Except Vancouver had a 3-2 series lead they blew instead of a 3-1. But it felt a lot like this. So Rolison saves 24 out of 26. They move on. Like I said, they get swept by the Anaheim Ducks in a very, very, very slow series. I wasn't covering that one. When I was looking at the 2003 playoffs, I looked at that series like, oh, no. And just kept going. Kluche saved 12 out of 16. So the frustrating thing for Vancouver in this series is Kluche only faces 16 shots here, 23 shots here. There was only 26 shots against the 2 goaltenders in this game. 27 here. 18 here, 18 here, and 21 here. Vancouver's defense, pretty darn solid. They don't allow very many shots. So unlike with the Luongo meltdowns that take place, where you see so many shots, especially against Chicago, that were from prime opportunities right in front of the net, this was just, Vancouver's defense playing really well. They couldn't get the saves that were necessary in order to win. So Gaborik had 5 goals and 6 assists in this series. He was kind of a Canuck killer. Wes Walls had 5 goals and 5 assists. Zoltok, 2 goals, 5 assists. Brunette, 3 goals, 3 assists. Cliff Ronning had 2 goals and 4 assists against the team that decided he wasn't worth $1 million when he left. Rolison was 4-1 with a .922 save percentage. Fernandez was 0-2 with an .899 save percentage. On the Vancouver side, Morrison, 2 goals, 5 assists. Naslund, 1 goal, 6 assists. Jovanovski had 5 goals in this series. Pretty solid. Trent Klatt had a goal and 3 assists. Henrik Sedin had a goal and 2 assists. Daniel Sedin had a goal and an assist in this series. The team was not theirs yet. They were not getting the kind of ice time they would shortly after, basically after the lockout wiped out season of 04-05. Kluche was 3-4 with an .826 save percentage. And it was abysmal. And then in 03-04, it didn't get better for Vancouver. But I know I'm not covering the 2004 series they were in against the Flames, because there are other series from that year that would be far more interesting to look at. But this was interesting because both of these teams had gone through 3-1 comebacks in the previous round. And then Minnesota accomplished that feat again with a 3-1 comeback. And after Game 4, the Canucks were saying all the right things. The 4th game's the hardest to win. We know these guys aren't down and out. We saw what they did against Colorado. We're not taking it lightly. We're going home. We have a chance to end this. We're going to do our best to get it done. And they lost 7-2 in Game 5. They laid an egg in Game 5. So, yeah, it got interesting from there. But if you're a Minnesota fan, this is as far as Minnesota ever went in the playoffs, which is the other reason I covered this series today. Minnesota never went further than this in the playoffs. So it was a big year for the Minnesota Wild, and it was relatively early in their existence as well. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It means a lot. I will talk to you again soon.